children, the Venceremos, and DeFries is going to be up there offering to be a hitman. You wouldn't have these men going to the Vietnam veterans and filtering these organizations. And a black man living with these white people and supposedly radicals, some policemen may just pick him up and think something's funny, or some may say he's a hitman, let's put a check on him. And the police department may put a check on him, but if he's an agent, there's a hold. If he works for the FBI or the police department, all he does is pick up a phone and call the FBI, and he gets out. But if some smart policeman picked Donald DeFries up from March until the Hearst kidnapping in February, the whole thing would be blown and all their investment in this agent would be gone. So one reason to use doubles, I'm convinced, is that if they pick one up, they can substitute the other, and he would be out on the street. You see, Lee Harvey Oswald was supposed to shoot John Kennedy at Chicago at the time of the football game, 3 weeks to the assassination that actually did kill him. And Lee Harvey Oswald up there rode a car, and it was an altogether different trip, but it was still Lee Harvey Oswald who was involved. And the other Oswald was down in Texas working at the book depository at that time, as a standby, like in these crossfires, these assassinations at the Ambassador Hotel, Dealey Plaza, Laurel Shopping Center where Wallace was shot. There are second guns, they're standbys. You don't rely on one man and one bullet to go to all that trouble. So the second Donald DeFries surfaced this week, and I think that's important to realize it's a part of every espionage operation. Now, San Francisco has been a scene of terror. They call them the zebra killings. The black community is terrorized. They are stopped on the streets if they're a certain size and weight or body build. And then it's injunction. The court judge is supposed to decide on whether they can do this legally this week. And in the meantime, they've stopped 500 blacks. They not only stopped them, but they have their social security number, and now they carry a card saying, yes, the police have checked me out, because they're now, like South Africa, they're card-carrying blacks. They've passed the test. And this is the beginning of the race war, as I've said on this program, since Dr. Marcus Foster was killed, and the Nazi Party up in San Leandro had foreknowledge. They talked about killing that mixed-master school superintendent in Oakland, and the Nazi Party was up in San Francisco this weekend, and you saw their uniform in the Chronicle, and they're offering to help find the black people, and they're making their presence known that they have a solution. When you're ready for them, they will step forward, and in the meantime, their services, they would be glad to stop blacks and see which one is the zombie killer. And I'm sure that if they had any foreknowledge of the Foster killing, they could even find the zombie killer if they had to. If it's a police agent or a former mental patient or a former prisoner who has had behavior modification, they could find their selected man and show that the Nazi Party is better than the FBI and the police, and be sure to assassinate in a skirmish a selected man that up till that time had been programmed, so that to make sure that he didn't talk. So we have our own vigilantes on the street, and the American Nazi Party is right there and willing to help. I did an article in the Berkeley Barb with another friend, Stephanie, that's out on the stands this week. It says is Sin Q, that's Donald DeFries, the first black Lee Harvey Oswald. And if you can get a hold of the Berkeley Barb, I think you'll find the article interesting. And it's the third largest article. I did two for the Realist, and we did this one to get it out on the stands because the Realist wasn't ready to go to print. So this one is out now, and if you can get it and read it, I hope you'll find the information interesting to you about my opinions of what the SLA is. And in that article, I mentioned the fact that the SLA is going into a big national and international trip, and they're going to go into all of these kidnappings, which Mr. Hearst says the matter's almost out of his hands because of the kidnappings. And I hope people will call the Civil Liberties Union and tell them to get in touch with me. I think that all over the country, we should have people in every city where we've had these phony kidnappings, because that's what the last 14 were, to investigate just what is going on. Because while I save articles, and I take 8 papers a day, talking about many fake kidnappings, a lot of people don't realize when they read a total of 14 or 16 kidnappings what is taking place. There was an article today in the paper, Wrong Kidnapping, Now a Hush-Hush. And this is It said the police refused to comment on Sunday on the report by a roommate of one of Patricia Hearst's cousins, who said that 3 black men kidnapped him. And now the Inspector Brown is saying, I've been ordered not to comment. The first story was that the roommate of the first cousin of Patricia Hearst was kidnapped by some black men, and now it seems that they're calling it the snatch that failed, or the wrong kidnapping is a hush-hush. But it seems that the particular man who spread the story, Van R. Bush, 31, he said he was released by a tunnel when the abductors realized that he wasn't William Hearst II. He can't be found. He's disappeared. He's been hazy about the details of the case. He very easily could be a provocateur who's just spreading the stories of multiple kidnappings. So this little kidnapping that was supposed to be a William Hearst II has been hushed up. Now, there was another kidnapping down in Hollandale, Florida, an employee of a bank who told the police that he was kidnapped and held for $60,000 ransom. His name is Albert Danzel. He's 43 years old, and he works at the Citizens National Bank. He claims he was held 24 hours, taken out to the Atlantic Ocean where they wanted him to die, and that he swam back, and the ransom was supposed to be put in a trash can. The FBI said that they will not report whether or not the ransom was put in a trash can or not, the $69,000. But now they're calling the kidnapping a hoax, and it seems that he swam right back to 9 blocks from where his car was parked on the beach. Now, one paper, the Associated Press, could call it a hoax, but the thing goes out as a kidnapping, and there are many papers that report that a bank employee was kidnapped for $60,000, and not all of them are going to tell you later it's a hoax. Now, this same man that was kidnapped at this bank, he was dropped in the water. Another person worked at the bank, was president of the Bank of Hollandale, Florida, where he was supposed to have been kidnapped in January. His name is Charles Lance, and he's president of the Citizens National Bank. And there was supposed to be a ransom of $100,000 for him, and he was held in a hotel room. And the article from the San Jose Mercury went on to say no arrests were made in that case. Now, that's like the kidnapping of the banker's wife up in St. Paul, Minneapolis, Minnesota, didn't get any charges. They kidnapped her and had her gone for several days. She disappeared from a shopping center, and they were not charged with kidnapping. A way to get the Watergate people to talk about what happened was when the Judge John Sirica gave them 30 or 40 years in jail, and then James McCord said, well, he wasn't going to go to jail. Jeb Magruder was walking around, and all the others were getting off, and he didn't like the stiff sentence, so he started to talk. The one solution to prove that all these kidnappings are fake kidnappings is to insist, look at the kind of trial they had, and insist, for example, that we sit there, the Attorney General Saxby says we should be hard on kidnappers, and Evelyn Younger, the Attorney General of California, says be hard on kidnappers. Why don't we go to every trial of every one of these mini fake kidnappings and see it, they're all getting off, and they're returning the money, and nothing is happening, and there's even a question that the money came from this man's own bank. Well, the story goes out that we're having all these kidnappings, but the facts behind each one of them shows that they're not true. So if the judges were very strict, for example, if the judge took the kidnapper of Charles Lance, where no arrests were made, and gave him 40 years in jail, he would break down the people who are behind this paramilitary operation, and those people would talk. It's like with the murder of Yablonsky, the labor leader, and his wife and daughter. 3 people got a stiff penalty, like the death penalty, and when they began to talk and named another person, and that named another person, then they got Tony Boyle, who was finally convicted, who's president of the mine workers. So the way to bring, then you have to go from Tony Boyle up to the Justice Department, because the very first day that Yablonsky was killed, the people that were caught said that it was Tony, they mentioned the name Tony, who hired them. So you have to be awfully thick-skinned not to relate Tony Boyle to Yablonsky, considering the feuds that were going on among the mine workers and the election problems that were taking place. So one of the solutions, I think, that's very important is to give a very stiff sentence to all these kidnappings that have taken place since the first of the year. And then you'd find that these people would reveal who's behind this conspiracy, the kidnapping of Reg Murphy, or even Ian Ball, the man who pulled his car up in front of Princess Anne. Where did he get the $700? Who provided him with the alias? And you'd end this rash of kidnapping, and if you end the rash of kidnapping, then you could ask the president, if he is a president, to remove Attorney General William Saxby for linking all these as being kidnappings or telling Mr. Hearst they're kidnappings when they're not. Now, there was another news article yesterday about a ransom note leads detectives to a boy and his suspected kidnapper, and the city's in Auburn. And it tells about an 11-year-old boy who was coming home from school, and he was handcuffed to pipes in the bathroom. He was last seen last Monday, and it was the apartment or home of a man named Roger Miller. So this boy is kidnapped, and the ransom note goes like this. It said he's being held by the Symbionese Liberation Army for $300 million in ransom. Now that is totally asinine, and all it does is provide a cover story again for these kidnappings that they are going across the nation. They stretch your imagination so far, it's unbelievable that anyone can really fall for this, but maybe they don't take all the papers I take or even read one paper a day. But what happened was they went in and got the little boy who's handcuffed to the bed. How did they find him? Well, it was just a hunch of the investigating officers. They said, the sheriff said that he just had a hunch. This is the newspaper article. As I read the letter, the kidnap letter, it just sounded like something Miller might have to do with it. They're talking about Roger Miller. And he added he knew of Miller and he knew where he lived. So they read a letter and happened to think that, oh, Roger Miller writes like this. This is his style of writing. So they go to his house and find an 11-year-old boy whose ransom is supposed to be $300 million to the Symbionese Liberation Army. This spreading the SLA name around the country to create a system of terror, just like we did in Southeast Asia with our Phoenix program, is exactly what's coming down in this country. Now, there was another article in the paper this week. A bomb rips the office of the Teamsters, causing $75,000 damage in Burlingame, the area close to where Patricia Hearst's family lives. And it says that in Sacramento, Governor Regan said the bombing was part and parcel of the increasing violent atmosphere building up in the country. Now, who's doing the violence? If we opened up all of the trials of the Vietnam veterans, the case up in Seattle, the one in Detroit, Cincinnati, Ohio, Miami, wherever the violence has been investigated for the war demonstrations, it was the FBI that bought the violence in, that bought the guns, the ammunition, and handed it to the agents to make the hippies, the anti-war people, look like they were violent. Now, somebody has to catch on that if all this was true in the conspiracies of the 60s and 70s, that it's also happening here. There was another shootout in Bakersfield where 18 shots were shot at officers. Imagine a massive mass hunt in police cars that were gunned down, and these officers can't catch a man who's shooting the police cars. Well, all they lose is a couple of holes in the police car, but look how much mileage you get for that. Now, before we close, I have about 2 minutes to talk about a Jack Anderson article today about Secretary John Connally. John Connally is being named by Mr. Jacobson for being involved in the milk fund scandal that's part of the Watergate exposure. John Connally, the article says no whitewash, and what Jack Anderson is saying is Leon Jaworski didn't cover up the part that John Connally had to do in the milk funding, that because he was involved with clients of his, he handed over the investigation to somebody else, and that's how John Connally got caught, that he couldn't cover it up. There's not a whitewash of Connally's involvement. Well, the system's trying to say, look how clean the Justice Department is. Mr. Jaworski is so clean that the prosecution goes through even though he has clients in the milk business or knows John Connally. The fact remains that John Connally was former governor of Texas at the time of the John Kennedy assassination and received correspondence from Lee Harvey Oswald and knew he was an agent of Navy intelligence. And John Connally assigned Leon Jaworski from the CIA Foundation in Houston to protect the interests of Texas on the Warren Commission. And that's what Jaworski did. So when they fired Archibald Cox in Washington, Connally was the one who